The rain tasted like metal and regret. Celeste hadn't noticed when it started, only that her white blouse now clung to her skin like a second layer of shame, transparent and exposing. She ran barefoot down Sullivan Street, her heels discarded 3 blocks back when running became more important than dignity. Behind her, voices shouted, male, angry, getting closer. Hi wonderful viewer, we welcome you to our channel, welcome. If you're loving the energy already, subscribe, there's more where that came from. She should have seen it coming. The late nights Devon spent at the office. The way his eyes slid away when she asked about the expensive watch. The text message she wasn't supposed to see, she's perfect. Trusts everything. We'll clean out her accounts tonight and disappear. But she hadn't seen it. She'd loved him. Believed him. And now his friends, if that's what they were, chased her through rain-slicked streets because she'd overheard too much, seen the duffel bags full of cash, recognized faces from news reports about organized crime. Celeste's lungs burned. Her vision blurred with rain and tears. She turned into an alley, her last mistake, and hit a dead end. Brick walls rose on 3 sides like a tomb. She spun around as 3 men blocked the only exit, their silhouettes backlit by distant streetlights. Please, she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. I won't tell anyone. I just want to go home. The tallest one laughed. Too late for that, sweetheart. You're a loose end. Devon's orders. Devon's orders. The man she'd planned a future with had just signed her death warrant. Across the city, in a penthouse wrapped in shadows and silence, Dante Volkov stood at floor-to-ceiling windows watching rain paint the glass. He held a tumbler of whiskey he hadn't touched. Behind him, his underboss Nikolai reviewed security footage on 3 monitors. The Marino family is moving product through the docks again, Nikolai said. They're testing boundaries. Dante didn't respond. He was thinking about his sister, gone 5 years now. Murdered because she'd trusted the wrong man. He'd built an empire on the ashes of that trust, became the thing people feared in the dark. No one touched his people. No one betrayed his family. Not twice. His phone buzzed. A text from one of his street contacts. Problem on Sullivan. 3 of Devon Crane's crew cornering a woman. Looks bad. Dante's jaw tightened. Devon Crane, a small-time conman trying to play in dangerous circles, using women as pawns. He'd been on Dante's radar for months, a pest not worth the bullet. But this. Get the car, Dante said quietly. Nikolai looked up. Boss, it's probably nothing. Some domestic situation. Get the car. Something in Dante's voice made Nikolai move immediately. In 7 years, he'd learned to recognize that tone, the one that meant Dante had seen something the rest of them missed, the one that meant someone was about to learn why you didn't create victims in Volkov territory. The elevator descended 50 floors in silence. Dante adjusted his cufflinks, a habit from another life when appearance mattered differently. Now it was armor. The tailored suit, the cold expression, the reputation that preceded him, all carefully constructed walls. But sometimes, late at night, he still remembered being someone else. Someone who believed love existed outside of leverage and loyalty bought with fear. The Mercedes tore through rain-slicked streets, Nikolai driving with practiced precision. Dante watched the city blur past, wondering why he was doing this, why one text about one woman had pulled him from his tower. Then he heard it, a scream, cut short, from the alley ahead. He was out of the car before it fully stopped. The first man's hand closed around Celeste's throat, slamming her back against wet brick. Pain exploded across her shoulders, but worse was the pressure on her windpipe, the way air became precious and impossible. Devon said make it look like a mugging, the man said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. His breath smelled like cigarettes and something sour. So we'll take your purse, your phone, whatever. But first, step away from her. The voice came from the alley entrance, low and absolutely calm. The kind of calm that made Celeste's attacker freeze, his grip loosening just slightly. She could barely see through her oxygen-starved vision, but she made out a tall figure silhouetted against the street, rain falling around him like a curtain. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than her car, and he stood with the stillness of someone who'd never had to prove anything to anyone. "Who the hell are you?" the second attacker demanded, reaching for something under his jacket. "The reason you're going to walk away." The man stepped forward into the dim light filtering through the alley. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that reflected no warmth. "You have 3 seconds. The man holding Celeste laughed nervously. "There's 3 of us, one of you, and—" The stranger moved. Celeste didn't see what happened exactly. One moment he was 5 feet away, the next the man choking her was on the ground, gasping, clutching his wrist at an angle that made her stomach turn. The second attacker pulled his gun but never got it level. A single fluid motion and he was disarmed, the weapon now in the stranger's hand. The third man ran. Smart choice. The stranger pointed the gun at the remaining 2. "You're going to crawl out of this alley. Then you're going to tell Devon Crane that Sullivan Street belongs to Volkov. Tell him what happens to men who put their hands on women in my territory. Tell him he has 24 hours to leave the city before I decide his life isn't worth the inconvenience of disposing of his body. Do you understand?" Yes, Volkov, we didn't know we—" "Get out." They scrambled away, leaving trails of blood diluted by rain. The stranger engaged the gun's safety with practiced ease and tucked it into his jacket. Then he turned to Celeste, and she saw his eyes properly for the first time. They were gray, like storm clouds, and completely unreadable. But something in them softened when he looked at her shaking against the wall, soaked and barefoot and still trying to breathe properly. "You're hurt," he said. "Not a question." Celeste tried to speak, but couldn't. Her throat felt crushed, her whole body trembling so violently her teeth chattered. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by shock and the delayed understanding that she'd almost died. Devon had tried to kill her. The man she'd loved, who she'd cooked breakfast for that morning, who'd kissed her forehead and called her his future, he'd sent men to murder her in an alley like she was nothing. Her knees buckled. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground, one arm supporting her weight with surprising gentleness. Up close, she could see the fine fabric of his suit, smell expensive cologne mixed with rain and something darker, gunpowder maybe. He was dangerous. Everything about him screamed danger. But his touch was careful, like she was something breakable. "Easy," he said quietly. "You're safe now. Can you walk?" She shook her head. Couldn't speak, couldn't walk, couldn't think past the roaring in her ears and the feeling of hands around her throat. He studied her for a moment, something flickering across his expression, recognition, maybe, or memory. Then he made a decision. "I'm going to pick you up. Don't fight me." Before she could process the words, he'd lifted her effortlessly, one arm under her knees, the other supporting her back. She should have protested, should have been terrified, but exhaustion and shock had stripped away her defenses. She let her head fall against his shoulder, felt his heart beating steady and strong through the expensive fabric. "Nikolai," he called toward the street. A shorter man appeared, wearing a similar suit and an expression of careful neutrality. "Open the door. We're taking her somewhere safe." "Boss, is that?" "Do it." The Mercedes's interior smelled like leather and cedar. Celeste was placed gently in the back seat, and the stranger, Volkov they'd called him, slid in beside her. He shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat, impossibly soft. "What's your name?" he asked as the car pulled away from the alley. "Celeste." Her voice came out raw, damaged. "Celeste Monroe." "Dante Volkov." He paused, then added, "You know who I am." She did. Everyone in the city knew that name, whispered in the same breath as words like dangerous and untouchable and don't cross. The Mafia boss who controlled half the underground, who made people disappear, whose reputation was built on violence and power. She should have been terrified. Instead, all she felt was confused gratitude and the lingering warmth of his jacket around her shoulders. "Why did you help me?" she whispered. Dante looked out the window at the passing city, rain streaking the glass like tears. When he spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't expected, pain, buried deep but still present. "Because 5 years ago, Someone didn't help my sister when she needed it. And I've regretted it every day since. The vulnerability in those words hung between them like a bridge, connecting two broken people in the darkness of a speeding car. Celeste felt something shift in her chest, some locked door beginning to open despite every warning her mind was screaming. Dante's penthouse was nothing like Celeste expected. She'd imagined something cold and sterile, all black marble and sharp edges, a villain's lair from a movie. Instead, the space felt almost warm. Soft lighting, dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with actual books that looked red. Through the windows, the city spread out below like scattered diamonds. Bathrooms through there, Dante said, gesturing to a hallway. There are towels, and I'll have Nikolai bring some clothes that might fit. Take your time. She nodded, still clutching his jacket around her shoulders like a lifeline, and disappeared down the hall. The moment she was gone, Dante's carefully maintained composure cracked. He poured himself that whiskey he'd abandoned earlier and drank it in one burning swallow. What was he doing? Bringing a stranger into his home, his sanctuary, the one place in the world where he could drop the mask? She was a complication he didn't need, a vulnerability he couldn't afford. But when he'd seen her in that alley, something in him had broken open. The way she'd looked, terrified and betrayed and still trying to be brave, it was too familiar. Too much like the last time he'd seen his sister alive, when she called him crying about her boyfriend's debts, and he told her to handle it herself because he was in a meeting. 3 hours later, she was dead. He'd never forgiven himself. Never would. Nikolai appeared with a bag of clothes. She's Devon Crane's girlfriend. Or was. Word on the street is he's been running a long con, using her accounts to launder money. When she found out tonight, he decided she was a liability. Dante's jaw tightened. Find Devon. I want him brought here. Alive. Already on it, boss. What about the girl? She stays here tonight. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. Nikolai raised an eyebrow but said nothing. In 7 years, he'd never seen Dante bring anyone to the penthouse. Not business associates, not informants, certainly not victims he'd rescued. This was different, and they both knew it. 20 minutes later, Celeste emerged wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that were comically large on her frame. She'd washed away the rain and the blood, but her neck was already bruising, dark purple fingerprints stark against pale skin. Her hair hung damp around her shoulders, and without makeup, she looked younger, maybe 26 or 27. She also looked lost. Sit, Dante said, softer than he'd intended. He'd set out tea on the coffee table, chamomile with honey, the kind his mother used to make. You need to warm up. Celeste sat carefully on the edge of the leather couch, accepting the cup with trembling hands. Thank you. For everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. Don't think about it. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain against the windows the only sound. Celeste sipped her tea, and Dante watched her, trying to reconcile the broken woman on his couch with the screaming voice in his head telling him this was a mistake. I'm so stupid, she finally said, her voice cracking. Everyone told me Devon was bad news. My sister, my best friend, even my boss. But I thought I knew better. I thought he loved me. How could I be so blind? Love makes us blind. Dante's voice was rough. It's not stupidity. It's hope. And hope is the most dangerous thing we can carry. She looked up at him, really looked, and he felt exposed in a way he hadn't in years. You don't seem like someone who believes in hope. I don't. Not anymore. He paused, then added, my sister did though. Believed in love, in second chances, in seeing the good in people. It got her killed. I'm sorry. The words were simple but genuine. That's why you helped me, isn't it? Because of her. Partly. He met her eyes, those dark brown eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. And partly because when I saw you in that alley, fighting even though you were terrified, refusing to make it easy for them, I saw strength. Real strength, not the kind that comes from violence or power. The kind that comes from choosing to keep going even when everything is broken. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. I don't feel strong. I feel like an idiot who wasted 2 years on a man who never loved me, who saw me as nothing but a mark. How do I come back from that? How do I ever trust anyone again? Dante set down his glass and moved to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not so close that she'd feel trapped. You don't have to trust everyone. But maybe you don't have to close yourself off completely either. Maybe you just learn to trust your instincts better. And maybe you recognize that what happened wasn't your fault. How can you say that? I ignored every red flag, every warning. Because predators are good at what they do. They study their prey, find the weaknesses, exploit the kindness. Devon saw someone with a good heart and used it against you. That's not your failure. That's his. She turned to him, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition, the kind of connection that forms when two wounded people see their pain reflected in someone else. Why are you being so kind to me? She whispered. Everyone says you're dangerous, that you hurt people, that you're someone to fear. But right now, you're the only person who's made me feel safe in years. Dante felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd built brick by careful brick. Maybe I'm tired of only being the monster. Maybe, just for tonight, I want to remember what it feels like to be human. The vulnerability in his words hung in the air between them. Celeste reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed her hand over his. Her fingers were small and warm, and he realized he was starving for this, simple human contact without calculation or fear. Thank you, Dante, she said softly. For saving me. For bringing me here. For seeing me as more than just a victim. Thank you for reminding me I'm more than just what I've become. They sat like that for a long moment, hands touching, two broken people finding unexpected comfort in the darkness. The rain continued falling outside, washing the city clean, and for the first time in 5 years, Dante felt something other than emptiness. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, impossible hope. Celeste leaned her head against his shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her. Dante stayed perfectly still, afraid to break the moment, afraid to examine too closely what he was feeling. This woman, this stranger, had walked into his life through violence and betrayal, and somehow in the space of an hour had reminded him that beneath the suits and the reputation and the carefully maintained control, he was still capable of feeling something other than rage. What happens tomorrow? She asked sleepily. Tomorrow I deal with Devon. Make sure he never hurts you or anyone else again. And after that? Dante looked down at her, at this unexpected presence in his carefully controlled world. He should tell her to leave, to go back to her life and forget this night ever happened. Getting close to him was dangerous. Everyone who'd ever mattered to him had either left or died, and he couldn't bear adding her name to that list. But when he opened his mouth, different words came out. After that, we figure it out. Together, if you want. She lifted her head, meeting his eyes with surprise and something that looked like cautious hope. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're strong when you think you're broken. I know you chose to run instead of giving up. I know that in the worst moment of your life, you still said please, like their humanity mattered more than your fear. He paused, then added quietly, I know that when I look at you, I feel something I thought died with my sister. And that terrifies me more than any enemy I've ever faced. Celeste's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying stay. Not just tonight. Stay until you feel safe again. Stay until you remember who you are without him. And maybe, he stopped, the words too big, too dangerous. Maybe we both learn that broken things can still be worth something. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling, a small fragile thing that lit up something dark inside him. I'd like that. I'd really like that. When broken people find each other in the darkness, do you believe they can heal together? Or do some wounds run too deep? Share your thoughts below. Outside, the rain was slowing, and somewhere across the city, Devon Crane was learning that running from Dante Volkov was impossible. But inside the penthouse, two people who'd lost their way sat together on a leather couch, hands intertwined, beginning to believe that maybe love wasn't always found in the light. Sometimes it was forged in shadows, between a woman learning to trust again and a man learning he was more than his darkness. Sometimes it was unexpected, dangerous, and absolutely real. And sometimes, when everything falls apart, that's exactly when life gives you a chance to build something better from the pieces. Celeste fell asleep against Dante's shoulder as dawn began to break over the city. He stayed awake, watching over her, this unexpected miracle who'd stumbled into his life covered in rain and betrayal. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, what complications this connection would create, or how they'd navigate the impossible distance between her world and his. But for the first time in 5 years, Dante Volkov believed that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance at something real. And that was enough.